Namaste. Namaste.
I'm very happy to see you.
Yeah, very, very happy to see you. Yes.
It's a surprise for me because this material is so strong, and I'm from India, from Kerala. I find out a couple of days ago, almost like months ago, I find out from hearing from you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Please carry.
Yeah, most welcome, most welcome. So we will begin the class. Most welcome. Yeah, thank you.
Hello everyone. Welcome to the continuation of the discussion of Yoga Sutras. This meeting will be recorded and it will be posted on YouTube. So if you have missed any of the previous sessions, it is there on YouTube. Please do watch them. Also, if you have any questions, please feel free to unmute and ask. I'll hand it over to Swami.
This meeting is being recorded.
Yogena chittasya padena vacham malam sharirasya cha vaidhyakena upakurotam pravaram muninam padanjalim pranjaliranatosmi stuve padanjalim vyasam shankaram cha munitrayam kartra sutrasya bhashyasya kramad vivaranasya cha. So we will again we will make a review of some of the sutras that we discussed earlier. You will remember we discussed this 10th sutra, which is which begins the discussion, which eventually goes on to expound the concept of karmashaya, which is very, very unique contribution of Vyasa and Patanjali. Of course, Patanjali has only one statement, but Vyasa expounds it further and again much more elaborately expounded by the succeeding generations of commentators. So the sutra is, I think, yes. So we discussed earlier this particular 11th sutra, Dhyana Heyaha Tat Vrittayaha. Sat Tat Vrittayaha, those vrittis can be eradicated by meditation. So, Tat Vrittayaha Dhyana Heyaha, Dhyanena Heyaha means those vrittis can be eradicated by meditation. That's a statement. What it says is, Kriya Yoga. At the beginning of our spiritual practice, Kriya Yoga reduces vrittis and make them sukshma, or it's called tanugaranam, or subtle. So when we begin our spiritual practice with the Kriya Yoga expounded in the first sutra of Sadhana Pada, that is Tapas Swadhyaya Isharat Pranidhananani Kriya Yoga. So, this we discuss elaborately. So, Kriya Yoga helps us to objectify, to have a clear understanding of the vrittis stored up in our own chittam. So that's what normally happens, When we identify ourselves with vritti, we won't be aware of it. And through Kriya Yoga, we are trying to become aware of the vrittis within our own mind. And this is possible through this process of dissociation, by detaching ourselves, by de-identifying. When we stop identifying ourselves with our vrittis, then we become aware of it. To give an example, it's also we discussed earlier. When when I become angry, and when I'm able to be aware of the fact that there is anger arising in my mind, then my anger becomes the object. It's called objectification, and I become the subject. So I am actually able to be aware of the anger in my mind. So I become the witness. It is called Sakshi in the Vedanta. Of course, the idea comes in Yoga Sutra also. So Patanjali doesn't use the particular term Sakshi, which is a Vedantic term. Sakshi in Vedanta is defined as Bhogdritvad Audasinyatvad Sakshitvam. You become a witness, you become aware of something. You become a Sakshi when you are aware of what you are the witness of, what you have witnessed, and also when you are not involved in that particular incident. You should not be involved, you should be non-involved. That is Audasinyatva. Udasina means not involved. At the same time, we are aware of it. So this is the beginning of spiritual practice, both in yoga and also in Vedanta. And that's what really happens when any spiritual seeker begins to pray or meditate or all these activities are implied in the Kriya Yoga. Tapa means austerities. When we try to restrain our own physical needs and entanglements through austerities, and when we either by reading or listening to pranava, when we try to feed our own mind with spiritual food, that is swadhyaya, or Ishwar Pranidhana, when you become a devotee of God, when you resign yourself to God, then also actually you will be able to slowly become aware that somebody else is emerging in our own mind. It's called the emergence of a second personality, which incidentally is mentioned with a different sense in the psychology of Jung and Adler. It means when you try to meditate, when you practice Kriya Yoga, what happens? Then we become aware of our own emotions. So those emotions actually get weakened, because when we are aware of the fact that we are getting angry, then also we will think, should I really get angry? Can I avoid getting angry? Because you are not fully identified with anger. So anger doesn't possess you. You are not completely possessed by anger. We are able to detach ourselves from anger, dissociate ourselves from it. So then what happens is a wiser personality begins to emerge in our mind. And as we continue practicing spiritual disciplines, this wiser personality, the second personality, becomes more powerful, and eventually the lesser personality merges with the higher personality. Surprisingly, one of the commentators, not Vijnana Bhikshu quotes from every conceivable source of Hindu devotional literature, Bhagavata Purana, Gita, different Puranas and so on, especially in the context of Ishwar Pranidhana and other subjects. But one commentator actually quotes two verses from the Mundaka Upanishad. Dvasuparna Savija Sakhaya Samanam Vriksham Parishusvajade Tayor Anya Pipalam Swadatti Anasnan Anyu Abhichakasidi. This is the one they quote. Means a tree on which there are two birds which are identical, of the same color, same shape. They are totally alike to each other, identical. But one difference. The one bird is sitting on the branch below, the other one is sitting on the branch above. The bird sitting on the branch below, it goes on eating fruits, sometimes bitter fruits, then it becomes unhappy, sometimes sweet fruits, then it becomes happy. And eventually it climbs and reaches the top branch on which the other bird is sitting, which is sitting calm and quiet without eating any fruit. And when the lower bird reaches the bird sitting on the higher branch, it discovers its own identity with the other bird, which is not eating anything, which is calm and quiet. So this is what really happens when you practice Kriya Yoga. That means technically Kriya Yoga reduces vrittis into Tanu state. Tanu means here Sukshma state. Tanu Karanartham is mentioned, we discussed in the earlier sutras. And then what happens? Dhyana heyaha tadvrittayah. These vrittis get further weakened and reduced. And then when a person continues his meditation, spiritual practices, then what happens? He develops a prajna, and that prajna burns away all the samskaras and also the sukshma kleshas and vrittis. What happens is that these vrittis and samskaras, they become like burnt seeds. Normally, when we do any work, when we do any kind of activity, physical activity, mental activity, or verbal activities, where we do something, think something, or speak something, it creates a vritti. And that vritti becomes a samskara. As samskaras get deposited in the chittam, the more powerful samskaras are deposited in the karmasya. The other samskaras are the top layer of the mental lake. And then what happens whenever we confront a similar situation, these vrittis will re-emerge. So if you have done something and the samskara remains in the mental system, in future a similar situation arises, and then immediately what happens? We will have a tendency to repeat that action. If the action is accompanied by a pleasant result, we will try to do it. Raga. If it produced an unpleasant result, dvesha. Or if it has produced a frightening experience, abhinivesha. So raga, dvesha, abhinivesha. So they re-emerge in the form of kleshas and they remain deposited in the mental lake. But at the beginning of a spiritual life, through Kriya Yoga, we can reduce the vrittis themselves into the subtle form, and then these subtle forms can be further weakened and eradicated by meditation. And then we already discussed Pradiprasava, the word we discussed elaborately in the earlier sessions. Pradiprasava means counter-evolution. I mean, there is a journey right from Prakriti, Mahatattva, Ahankara, then mind, Panchajnanendriyas, Panchakarmendriyas, and then Panchatanmatras, from Tanmatras, Panchamahabhutas, all the way right up to the lowest empirical level, phenomenal level. There is a evolution. Through Pradiprasava, which means counter-evolution, by Kriya Yoga, by meditation, through Ashtanga Yoga, we can ascend the steps forward and reach Prakriti, and then we can identify ourselves with Purusha. This is called Pradiprasava, counter-evolution. Counter-evolution completely eradicates kleshas. That's the idea behind. So this is what we already discussed earlier. Now we will come to the next sutra. That is 12th one. Klesha Mulaha Karmasyo Drishta Adrishta Janma Vedaniyaha. This is the 12th sutra. 10 we already completed. 12th sutra is this one. Klesha Mulaha. So this Karmasaya, the cause of karmasya is klesha. So karmasya is called klesha mula. Its mula means cause. I mean root from which the plant emerges. That is called klesha. Karmasya. So what is karmasya? I mean it's the place, it is a repository in which all our deep samskaras are deposited. When we talk about samskaras, we should remember samskaras are nothing but solidified forms of vrittis. And these samskaras, so long as they remain in the mental lake, there is every possibility that they will re-emerge and will prompt us towards identical actions in future. So it is called sakarmasyeha drishta adrishta janma vedaniyeha. Now these samskaras, these deep-rooted samskaras, is called samskara sanjaya. That's a word used in some of the commentaries. Means it's a collection of samskaras. They get deposited in this in this system called chittam. It's called karmasya. Now, if these samskaras are deposited in the karmasya, then they will certainly, definitely will influence our life in this life or next life. That is drishta, adrishta. Drishta means in this life or next life. So that gives a clue to many of the problems. So we have to remember Yoga Sutras can be understood properly only if we accept these two doctrines. The concept of law of karma, the doctrine of law of karma, and the doctrine of rebirth or reincarnation. This is an important point, remember. So this particular sutra tells us that whatever samskaras are deposited in the karmasya, this repository of kleshas, they will certainly manifest sometime in our life, in this life or next life. Now in this sutra, the great commentator Vijnana Bhikshu, who wrote Yoga Bhashya Vartikam, he has very clearly expounded some important principles. Again, based on Vyasa's commentary. It's a commentary, a super commentary on Vyasa Bhashyam. So here, Vijnana Bhikshu says, I mean, in brief, this is what he says. Suppose we have done some very good actions in this life. It could be spiritual practices, prayer, meditation, or maybe helping some good persons, some noble souls, have done something involving great sacrifice, renunciation. If you have done something very noble, or if you have done something extremely bad, I mean extreme kinds of samskaras will manifest immediately. Other samskaras may wait for the next life. This is an important idea presented by Vijnana Bhikshu. So, if you have done some very good actions, then the beneficial result will emerge in this life itself. But if you have done some very bad action, then also it's a bad consequence we'll have to bear in this life itself. So he says, Tatra punya apunya karmaseka, lobha moha krodha prabhavaha. So punya apunya means either this latent deposit of karma is either in the form of desire, that is lobha, moha, greed, delusion, anger, krodha, all these. Either due to extreme greed, extreme anger, if you have done something bad, then the result will fructify in this life itself. And also, if you have done something extremely good, you sacrificing our own pleasure, our own enjoyments, our own benefits for the good of a noble cause or to help a noble person, then also that result will manifest in this life itself. So that's why tatra punya karmaseha lobha moha krodha prabhavaha sadrishta janma vediniyascha adrishta janma vediniyascha. It may fructify, we may face the consequences of our actions in this life or next life. If our life is long enough, the results of good and bad actions, which are extremely good and bad actions, we have to enjoy or suffer in this life itself. Otherwise, it will be postponed to next life. Tatra tivra samvegena mantra tapa samadhi bhi nivartida Ishvara devada maharshi mahanubhavanam aradhana dva. So some example, some options are given. Either you practice spiritual austerities with great concentration, mantra tapa, just reciting some sacred mantras, and or maybe praying to God, or extreme austerities, or maharshi mahanubhavanam aradhanadva means either you help a person who is a great spiritual person, maybe you help an ascetic. There are stories in the Puranas. You can remember, Puranas are not historical facts, but they are meant to teach certain higher truths. So there are many stories you find a demon accidentally happened to do a great service to a sage sitting in meditation in a cave in a deep forest. Maybe he may have saved the sage from the attack of a wild animal, and as a result, in his next life, he was born as a good person. But all his bad actions and their samskaras were washed away by this good deed. That could happen in this life itself, but if life is not long enough, it could happen in the next life. Ya parinishpannaha sa sadhya paripachyande punya karmasya iti. So it's called punya karmasya. Means this, let us say, karmasya can be compared to a bag, or it could be compared to the deeper layers of the mental lake. So there are punya, auspicious, beneficial samskaras, good samskaras, which are the byproducts of good actions, good thoughts, good practices, which are auspicious. They are called punya karmasya. Then the opposite of this, papa karmasya, means doing some evil deeds. They also produce evil results, which are deposited in mental system. So, then what happens is, it could be merit, spiritual merit, gathered by intense practice of samadhi, austerities, prayers, maybe worshipping or worshipping God, or engaging in spiritual disciplines. Then what happens, serving great men, or great men or great women, then what happens is, the result will be immediately felt. Sadhya eva parinishpana. Immediately the result is enjoyed or suffered. And then if the karmasya is papa karmasya, what about the negative karmas? Unpleasant consequences of unpleasant actions, bad actions. That also Vijnana Bhikshu says, yatha tivra kleshena bhida vyadita kripaneshu vishwasu upagadeshu va mahanubhaveshu va tapassishu krita punarapakaraha. Apakara means some bad actions. You do harm to a person who trusted you. This latent deposit of demerit, of evil actions, maybe you may have done to Bhida, somebody who was frightened, you did harm to somebody who was frightened, sick, Vyadhi, somebody who was sick or miserable, who are in unfortunate conditions, or you do some bad deed to some noble persons. Then what happens? The results will be immediately felt. So this particular sutra, the explanation by Vijnana Bhikshu gives a clue as to the structure of karmasya. Otherwise, we won't be able to understand it, really speaking. Karmasya, literally it means a place where the karmas remain in latent conditions. That's what it means. But how do they function? How do we relate this idea to our own everyday life? So Vijnana Bhikshu's elaborate exposition helps us to relate that to our own life. That's the idea behind. In other words, karmasya is the sum total of all residual effects of karma, thoughts, ideas, and so on. So that's an important sutra which explains. It's a very unique contribution of the Vyasa Patanjali duo to modern psychology. So that's why frequently, if we can understand, if we can think through Kriya Yoga or meditation, if we can think and contemplate on our own actions and can come to some, let's say, guesswork. Maybe I may have done something to deserve this unfortunate fate. Now this gives us wisdom. That's why, tapaswadhyaya ishvara pranidhanani kriya yoga. This kriya yoga, which helps us to take an objective view of our own vrittis and samskaras. And when we take an objective view of our own mind, well, I am now getting angry, it's absolutely meaningless. I have a strong dislike for something or somebody because of this experience. Well, I may have done something to deserve this. It doesn't mean that we should believe in fatalism or predetermination. That's not at all the implication. We should remember, Yoga Sutra is just the very antithesis of predeterminism. Frequently people reduce Yoga Sutras and Karma doctrine into some kind of a vapid, self-defeatist fatalism. It is the opposite actually. Once we can get an explanation of the experiences we are going through, then we can get this confidence, well, I can actually rebuild my own destiny. I can reconstruct my own future. I am not a slave in the hands of this powerful, mighty machine of karmas. So it is just the opposite of predeterminism. That should be kept in mind. Now we have the next sutra, which is again here. Next sutra is Sati Mule Tad Vipago Jati Ayur Bhoga. So Mule Sati, what it means? It is Sati Saptami in Sanskrit grammatical structure. When this klesha, these deep-rooted residual effects of our actions and vrittis are already there, so long as these samskaras, these deep-rooted samskaras are already present in our mental system, tad vipakaha, then what happens? The fruition, the working out will happen. So, of course, that one particular word is to be added to understand this sutra. Bhavati means So that's the idea behind. Satimule phalapraptir bhavati. That is the complete structure of the sutra. So certain words have to be added to make the sutras more sensible. So long as these kleshavrittis are there in our mental system, then those kleshavrittis, those samskaras will have to find their fruition. They will manifest someday. Unless we practice Kriya Yoga, Dhyana, and eventually reach Pariprasava that we already discussed. And at the beginning itself, if we can practice Kriya Yoga and meditation, then we are able to be aware of these deep-rooted samskaras in our mental system. We become aware of already manifesting in our personality in every life. That's why we sometimes manifest certain changes in our attitudes, our behavior patterns. When a person reaches 5th year, 11th year, 16th year, 21st year, you find during certain stages there will be a complete departure from our established ways of life. A sudden shift. This happens. It's all because of the fruition, the manifestation of certain samskaras at different stages in our life. That's why so long as these samskaras are there in our system, there will be reincarnation, rebirth, then there will be life, there will be good experiences and bad experiences. The jati, ayu, bhoga means. Jati means janma. Janma means birth, different life cycles. Ayuhu means, lifespan. And bhoga means good and bad experiences. So that's the idea behind. And then the next sutra is interconnected, so I shall read it and then come back to the 13th sutra. Okay, now te hlada paritapa phalaha punya hetutva. This is the 14th sutra. So 13th and 14th sutra should be read together. In the 14th sutra, te, this word, te means they. So what are we referring to by the word they? These jati ayurбhoga means new life cycles, rebirth, then again life, and again experiences, good and bad experiences. These are all caused by punya and apunya, means good actions and bad actions in the related sutras. Therefore, khlada paritapa phalaha, and therefore they will have both good and bad results. So these three factors, jati, ayu, bhoga, that is continuation of our life, that means next rebirth, another life, lifespan, and good and bad experiences, this continuing cycle. It could be an experience of mixed experiences, mean dukkha and sukha. Both can be found in every life cycle. That is the implication of 13th and 14th sutras. So that is an important thing. I think if you have got any question, you can ask during interaction. The 15th sutra requires more elaborate interpretation, so I will concentrate on that. Of course, there are certain Gita verses that frequently some commentators quote. For example, in the Gita there is a sloka which says that whatever you think at the time of death, that thought will influence your next life. So, whatever you think, Antagale means it begins, the last moment, whatever we think. Smaran Kritva Kaleberam Tame Vaidikaunteya Sada Bhava Bhavitaha. So, Antagale Smaran, that means at the last moment, whatever we contemplate or think about, Smaran, whatever thought we have in our mind, that thought will influence our next life and next lifespan and the experience of next life. Of course, we cannot go on doing undesirable things and then imagine we'll be able to think some noble thoughts at the time of death. It doesn't happen. It cannot happen. Because at the time of death, our natural tendencies that we have already got deposited in the mental system will express themselves. We will not be able to think a noble thought if we have not led a noble life. So the totality of all good and bad actions will express themselves at the last moment. That's what this is. So Ramanuja says, Ante Antakali yam va api bhavam smaran kaleberam tyajadi tam bhavam eva maranante iti antapratyescha purabhavita visheka eva jayate. That's the idea behind. You can find many incidents in Hindu mythological literature establishing this point of view. Now we will go to the 15th sutra, which is a very, very well-known sutra, which will comes later. That deals with parinama samskara. Parinama tapa samskara dukkhehi gunavrutti vishesha virodhacha dukkham eva sarvam vivekinaha. This is sutra. It's a very important sutra. Parinama tapa samskara dukkhehi gunavrutti virodhacha dukkham eva sarvam vivekinaha. Vivekinaha means for those who have got viveka, for those who have got this discerning wisdom, discriminative faculty, for them, to a person of true discrimination, everything is sorrowful because of suffering resulting from different samskaras. That is parinama samskara, tapa samskara, etc. So what are they? One samskara is changefulness of experience, anguish, vasanas, and also because of mutual conflict of gunas. Now, here Vyasa, in his commentary, he makes an important statement that gives us a clue as to what is parinama samskara. Parinama dukkhada nama pratikula sukhavasthayam api yoginam eva klishnati. It's a famous statement. What is that? The idea is this parinama dukkha, which is actually undesirable, it is experienced by a yogi even at the time of pleasure. So what does it mean? Even when everything is going on well for us, suppose there is no problem, there is no earthly problems, worldly problems, when we have a good time, even then we feel we have a strong feeling of incompleteness. That is what is called parinama dukkha. So it's not misery as we understand. Though often the word dukkha is translated into English word sorrow, In the real implication, not only in Buddhism and or yoga, but everywhere, dukkha here is slightly different from what the dictionary tells us about the word. What it means is a feeling of incompleteness. And that happens only to a person who is spiritually evolved. That's why Vivekinaha, that is the meaning of the sutra. These samskaras become a matter of experience only to a person who is spiritually evolved. And how does it happen? I mean, the idea is the worldly person enjoys first and suffers later on, when he is not able to enjoy. That is parinama dukkha. So, when he has got something to enjoy, then he enjoys. When he loses the object of his enjoyment, then he suffers. But a spiritually evolved person suffers even now, even when everything in the worldly sense, everything is going on well for him. We have a good job, plenty of money, plenty of wealth, plenty of all desirable things around us. Still, if a person feels a feeling of incompleteness in his mind, I want something higher, I want something more transcendental, that feeling of incompleteness is called dukkha. And that feeling, the feeling of incompleteness or inner imperfection, helps that person to evolve in his or her spiritual life. So that's why it is called parinama. Parinama means transformation. Parinama means change. So if you can have a feeling of incompleteness or imperfection, even when you are surrounded by all conceivable worldly enjoyments and pleasures, when there is nothing that you want, everything going on fine, you may have plenty of wealth, health, a good job, everything. Still, you feel an inner feel. You get an inner feeling of incompleteness or imperfection. That is called parinama dukkha. Because that person is able to suffer parinama dukkha, means he is able to feel and suffer this feeling of incompleteness even when every enjoyable experiences are available in front of him. Then what happens, that person will step into the next level of his spiritual evolution. That is the implication here. So very important. That's why Vyasa says parinama dukkhata nama pratikula sukhavasthayam api. Because when you have this sukhavastha, when you have everything going on well for you, you are richest man, good job, still, let's say Buddha, for example. Buddha was born a prince. He was not poor. He was not in need of money. And he was actually brought up in a set of circumstances that denied him any knowledge of the darker side of human life. He never knew what it means to be poor, to be in a position of disadvantage. So what happens, when he was about 28 years old, he was being taken out on a chariot by a charioteer. Then he saw these visions, the face of a sage he saw. But before he saw the face of a sage, which was an embodiment of calmness, quietness and tranquility and peace, he saw 3 other visions which gave him an idea of the darker side of human life. The unpleasant reality of sickness, death and old age. He saw an old man sitting in a street corner. He saw a dead body being taken on a procession to the cremation ground, and he saw an old man. So old age, death and sickness. Suddenly, he became aware of these darker realities. So, but at the same time, he was not facing any of these problems. He was growing up in a palace. So, still, he felt this, the darkness of the negative aspect of human life. And that actually forced him to become a Buddha eventually. That led him to become a Buddha. He left his palace. He walked 1,000 miles, reached Bodh Gaya, sat under a tree. So you find in Ashogosha's book, Buddhacharita, Ihasane Sushudu Me Shariram, Tugasti Mamsam Chivilayam Chayatuhu, Aprapi Suddhim, Bhuku Janma Durlabham, Naivasanat Kaya Mataschalishidi. He sat under the tree. I won't get up from this seat before I attain the spiritual realization, the spiritual enlightenment, which is possible for one to attain only at the end of several life cycles. So it is an example of parinama dukkha. That's what Vyasa says. So these are the importance here. Again, Indriyanam triptehi trishnaksheha upashanti tat sukham ya indriyanam laulyad anupashanti tat sukham bhoga trishna. This again Vyasa says, ya bhogeshu indriyanam triptehi trishna visha upashanti tat sukham. So sukham in the ordinary sense, sukha means pleasure, means something that that satisfies our senses. And laulyar anupashanti sat dukham. So when you don't get what we look for, that leads to dukkha. That's the idea behind. Of course, many commentators again refer one important verse from Mahabharata, na jadu kama kamanam upabhogena shamiti kavisha krishnavatmeva bhuya eva abhivardhate. This is a very important verse from Mahabharata, So if you have a blazing fire, you cannot put out the fire by pouring ghee on it, because ghee will only further inflame the fire. You cannot put out fire by pouring ghee or oil or anything on it. You have to put something else that goes against the fire. Similarly, by enjoying more, you cannot get out of the entanglement of enjoyments. The desire for enjoyments will only increase if we keep enjoying more and more. Therefore, what is needed is one should be able to understand the limitation of enjoyments, and then one becomes aware of the incompleteness, the imperfection. One becomes aware of the fact that worldly enjoyments cannot bring us lasting peace. So here there are two factors. One is a feeling of incompleteness. Secondly, a quest for something higher. So these two combined together is called parinama dukkha. There is the awareness of the incompleteness, but there is the potential for change, further evolution in our life. So it is called parinama dukkha. So that is the meaning of the first important expression of the sutra. Parinama, tapa, samskara dukkhehi. So there is parinama dukkha, tapa dukkha and samskara dukkha. We will discuss one after another in the coming sessions. Now we have interactions maybe for half an hour. Most welcome.
Hari Om Swamiji. Yeah, I have a question. So you were talking about Drishta Janma and Adrishta Janma,
Yeah.
and when you were explaining about it, you spoke about how it translates to seen life and unseen life, which is basically this life and future lives. And to understand the Yoga Sutra, one of the axioms that we have to accept is the concept of a Punarjanma.
Yeah.
But why can't Adrishta Janma be parts of this life which we don't see? Basically, something like horrors that are experienced during dreams, like nightmares. They are something we don't see directly. We don't control those that aspect of our life. So why can't Adrishta Janma translate to that? Why should it necessarily come from a point of view of Punarjanma?
Yeah, there are many, of course, there are many explanations based on yoga and also Vedanta and also Buddhism. These traditions believe in equally, they give equal importance to doctrine of law of karma and also reincarnation. Certain deep-rooted attitudes and emotions that we are born with, and the plurality, variety of human temperaments, characteristics, which we cannot explain on the basis of environment or parentage or genetics, can be a strong proof of previous life cycle. That's the idea behind. So, of course, Adrishta here doesn't mean future life cycles alone. They also mean previous life cycles. So, there are many deep-rooted instinctive characteristics which are not acquired or inherited through environmental heredity that we cannot explain otherwise. So, let's say if a person's characteristics or attitudes or emotions or feelings normally are explained in the light of his previous experiences in this life itself, in mainstream psychology. That's how you if you go backward in your life, you can see, you can trace the cause of your present predicaments, experiences, or whatever it is. But there are many characteristics, many emotions which cannot be explained in the light of experiences of this life cycle. So if you use the same tool, inference, Hanumana is called inference, then you have to extend your inquiry beyond the limit of this life. So it should be coming from some other source. So that's the idea behind it. Of course, in the Buddhist tradition, the Pratitya Samutpada, this dual link cycle, which constitute previous life, present life, and future life, which based on Buddhism's exposition of the Pratitya Samutpada, and also the yoga. See, Yoga Sutra, Patanjali himself, in his 195 sutras, he doesn't expound elaborately this concept of reincarnation. Actually, he takes it for granted. Because karmasaya itself, see for example, phobias, certain obsessions, which psychologists and psychiatrists cannot explain through psychoanalysis or in the light of the patient's experiences in this life. So if you extend your inquiry further backward, then you reach a point where there is an explanation. That's the idea behind. So I think it is not something that we can explain using the available tools of science and technology today. But after all, scientific temperament also accepts the importance of inference. Inference plays an important role in every scientific discovery. What you infer later is found to be real. That's what is called an invention or discovery. This is a unique theory that Patanjali and Vyasa together, of course other commentators also have expounded. That's the idea behind. You cannot scientifically prove, no, but it's only logical explanation of certain things which modern psychiatry cannot explain using the available tools now. That's all.
It's interesting, Swamiji, how you use our past to explain our future. So that is very interesting. Thanks, Swamiji.
Yeah.
Pranam Maharaj.
Yeah.
The karma is increased with every action we do. And tantric practices use lot of actions, and some of them are considered bad by normal people. How do they destroy the karmashaya and stop from creating new tendencies?
Yeah. I'm not competent to speak on tantric practices actually. So, well, of course, they have their own explanations mentioned in those books. They have their own, but they try to evolve and they try to ascend the consciousness level from Mooladhara to Sahasrara, going through the chakras and all that. But the intricate practices in some of those traditions, I'm not competent to explain. So I mostly consider your different systems of Indian philosophy and Vedanta, Vishishtadvaita, Dvaita. Of course, I study Vedas and Yoga Sutra, but Tantric tradition may have many explanations. They have many practices which, according to them, have a logical explanation, but I'm not fully competent to discuss those subjects. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Maharaj. And I have one observation about the earlier question about proof for the reincarnation. There is a big volume of research from University of Virginia by Dr. Ian Stevenson, and it's available online also. They have studied a couple of thousands of cases where they
Of course, I don't know whether the book you are referring to is the one which there have been many studies on case studies actually, focusing on different experiences reported in India and also in the Western world. Many, hundreds in fact. There have been cases where a child tells his parents, well, my child means a baby, maybe 54-year-old child, tells his parents, my home is somewhere else, and he takes the parents to some distant remote village in Ireland, and then the child gives a detailed explanation, description of the interior of the house, and it all turns out to be true. And then the child tells the place where he lived in the previous life. It all actually happens to be true. And they went to the officials in the area, and they found, and during that particular year the child was referring to, such a person lived there, and he had an accident at death, and there was a scar on the forehead of the child, which that man died of an accident. Now you can, there are many case studies, so this is something new. In fact, I have myself gone through many such books. So that's a different subject. I don't really refer to those books in the Yoga Sutra classes because they are so voluminous and so innumerable. So I mostly focus on Yoga Sutra. That's right. You're right. You're absolutely right. There are many case studies. Not just this one book. So many, in fact. In India also there have been many case studies. In fact, many books have photos of the persons, the children who eventually he identifies the place in which he lived in previous life. There are many, not just one. So many cases. With photos and pictures and newspaper reports are all present in many books. So this is a very elaborate subject. Okay.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you.
Ram Maharaj.
Namaste.
This is Mark.
Yeah.
In Swami Vivekananda's commentary on verse 15,
Yeah.
he says, "Never yet was there a great soul who had not to reject sense pleasures and enjoyments to acquire his greatness.
Yeah.
The cause of misery is the clash between the different forces of nature, one dragging one way and another dragging another, rendering permanent happiness impossible." Could you clarify what he means by this last sentence, the cause of misery,
Yeah.
being dragged one way and another
Yeah.
way?
Actually, Swamiji is referring to an important statement in Vyasa's commentary itself. So Vyasa says, mind is like a lake which flows in two opposite directions. One in the direction of bondage and suffering, another in the direction of enlightenment. So again, this again is a proof of conflicting samskaras that constitute the mental system called the chitta. So we have acquired multiple samskaras, but all these samskaras can be broadly put into two categories. One is positive, which will take a person to Kaivalya Vaha, means it takes you towards Kaivalya according to Vyasa, and also in the opposite direction, towards bondage and sufferings. This is Vyasa's commentary. Now, you can find, if you analyze our own mind, there are many samskaras, innumerable. But broadly, you can divide them in two categories. One is positive, the other is negative. We can test, in fact. Suppose we take a decision, tomorrow morning onwards, I shall meditate at 7 o'clock. So take a decision. When the time comes, sometimes we may have a tendency to postpone, or maybe today is not the right day, tomorrow I will. Or even if you try to meditate, you feel your mind is not cooperating. Now if you persist in your effort, one day you will succeed in meditating, but only after repeated efforts. Now why should your mind refuse to cooperate with you when you try to do something that is actually good for you? Our mind doesn't always permit us to do what we know to be the right thing to do. This conflict between what we want to do, something good for us, and what our mind permits us to do. Why should mind become hostile? A mind that doesn't allow you to do what you want to do, it's actually good for you, that mind is not your friend. But through persistent effort, you find mind begins to cooperate. Also in the process, you may read books, you may listen to talks, you may associate with persons who are spiritual seekers, so close association, or feeding your mind with good spiritual food, like through reading, association, discussions, or practices, whatever it is. Slowly you find the negative samskaras become weaker and weaker, and that's because positive samskaras increase in number. They become stronger. And as positive samskaras become stronger, as they increase in the volume, your mind slowly begins to cooperate with you. I can meditate. So this is one example. So Patanjali himself, of course, Vyasa implies that this a single life is not the result of experiences of just one previous life. Several life cycles can contribute to the samskaras which are unfolding in this one life itself. So this ongoing conflict between what we want to do and what our mind is ultimately willing to permit us to do. This conflict itself is a proof that
So Maharaj,
samskaras are various. Most of it.
it's very Maharaj very interesting about talk about mind and kaivalya. So mind and buddhi, I think there is two difference because mind is more related to fight or fly. That is more related to sense organs. I mean, like karmendriya and jnanendriyas. Like I hear about Guruji talk about pratyahara section, very interesting. So the buddhi is more seeing the mind, means like buddhi is controlling the senses, or naturally our senses really controlling the mind. So Guruji, here is kaivalya meanings more than mind meanings like buddhi. Can you explain to Guruji what is buddhi and what is mind?
That's right. You know, in the mainstream Vedanta, mind is defined as sankalpa vikalpatmika antakarana vritti, and buddhi means intellect, is defined as nisyatmika antakarana vritti. So buddhi is a decision making faculty, and mind is that part of the mental system which speculates between two options. Now in Patanjali system, the word chittam actually includes mana, buddhi, chitta and ahankara. All these are included. So that's why yogas chitta vritti nirodha, the chitta is defined by commentators not just as what we normally understand as mind, but the entire mental world is implied by the word chittam. The chittam as used in the Patanjala system is different from chittam as understood in the Vedanta or in mainstream language, So this is an important point we have to keep in mind. So our vrittis are deposited in the chittam. What does it mean? Vrittis themselves express in the form of the functions of mind, mana and buddhi and ahankara and all other functions. This is an important point, remember. So in Indian philosophical system, one word has got one definite, well-structured implication in one system of philosophy. So in Patanjali system, chittam includes buddhi and mind both. This is an important point. Because for him, for him, buddhi and mind, mana, buddhi, chitta, ahankara means egoism, and then the repository of memories which is chittam in the Vedantic system, and the speculative faculty which is mind again in Vedanta system, and also the decision making faculty that is in Vedanta. All these are included in the word chittam, because Patanjali is concerned by the word chittam. He means by the word chittam as the repository in which all the vrittis are deposited. From these vrittis, samskaras evolve. Repeated actions produce identical vrittis and they become one set of samskaras. So multiple samskaras evolve. That's the idea behind it. This idea. In Patanjali system, this is very important thing to remember. Chittam means mana, antakarana means internal systems. Mana, buddhi, chitta, ahankara, all included. Vajaspati and other commentators, they insist on this point. Otherwise, the word chitta vritti nirodha will not make sense. That's the idea. But chitta
So Guruji, this chittam actually meanings like a prakriti. The buddhi can be only possible to cultivate or maybe want to merge, more to change the drishta. So drishti here, Guruji talk about drishti like chittam. So because we are experiencing this physical body, we are experiencing seeing, feeling, connecting, knowing and acknowledging, and this all we are, because we have to experience truth to the higher spirit. So the Chittam Patanjali may be representing the form of these 5 elements, like Panchbhuta. This is a form of one.
No. You see, Patanjali's system can be properly understood only in the light of commentaries beginning with Vyasa Bhashya. One of the problems of Patanjali's system is it is in the form of sutra, and sutras do not themselves speak things clearly. So this is an important problem with this. Sutra means, alpaksharam asaddigdam saravat vishwato mukham. It means just a few words put together. Sutra means a thread. It also means a particular mechanism of expression. Alpaksharam asaddigdam saravat vishwato mukham. Astogam anavadyam cha sutram sutra vido viduhu. Very few words put together. It with loaded meaning, which is capable of expanded interpretation. So actually, Patanjali minus Vyasa, 0, to be very frank. You know why? Because Patanjali's sutras are elastic. So we can never really understand Patanjali without Vyasa Bhashya. It's just like Upanishad mantras. Upanishad mantras really, if you take literally, they don't mean anything without Shankaracharya's commentary. So those who wrote commentaries refuting Shankara's view have to depend Shankara's views only to understand the meaning. Then they refute. Like that, Patanjali, Atha Yoga Anushasana. What means Atha? Atha itself means Mangala Vachaka, it's an auspicious beginning and so on. But Atha is interpreted by the commentators at a particular point when you feel, actually this Parinama Dukkha, when you knock at all the doors and all the doors remain closed, finally you look for an explanation to some of the mysteries that you are seeking, that you find in front of you, and then you turn to think of your own mind. What's the meaning of life? That's the meaning of Atha. Only to such a person, Yoga Sutras will make sense. Those who knock at all the doors without any result, no, let me think if there's something beyond the mental, beyond the present, beyond the empirical. That's the meaning of Atha. So like that, Patanjali's 195 sutras really make sense only thanks to the commentators. And the first and most important commentary, the foundational commentary is Vyasa Bhashya. So Vyasa and all the succeeding commentators like Vajaspati or Vijnana Bhikshu or Shankaracharya's Vivarana, Bhojavrutti, Raja Bhatanda, even the later commentaries like the Harihararanya, Bhaswati, lived in 19th century. All the commentators had to look to Vyasa to understand what Patanjali was talking about. So according to them, Chitta means Mana, Buddhi, Chitta, Ahankara, called Antakarnas. The speculative faculty, the decision making faculty, the repository of memories, plus the sense of self-identity, egoism. Okay? Any other question? Yeah, thank you.
Maharaj, this is Saudata.
Oh, yeah.
I have a question. Yeah. So this Antakarana, this Manabuddhi Chitta Ahankar, so they are saying that this is matter.
Yeah.
Now, if this is matter, then according to the Western definition of matter, it should be kind of visible also.
Yeah.
But it is not. So, what is the definition of matter in Patanjali's Yoga Sutra?
According to Patanjali Yoga Sutra, the entire creation, in the phenomenal empirical world, the senses, including the Jnanendriyas, Karmendriyas, the 5 senses of perception, 5 senses of action, mind, buddhi, all these are evolutes of Prakriti. They are evolved from Prakriti. But then, this evolution itself happens due to a problem, because the evolution takes place because we do not realize our identity with Purusha. So, according to Patanjali's system, mind, buddhi, all these are evolutions of Prakriti, which is essentially Jada. Now that is the problem with Patanjali yoga system. So there is a dialectical conflict between Vedanta and Patanjali Darshanam. So that's why great commentators like Shankaracharya do not accept Patanjali's system as a complete system. Why? Because first of all, it is essentially dualistic. Secondly, how can this non-effulgent, unconscious Prakriti become the source of evolution? Prakriti is Jada, Purusha is Chetana. How can Prakriti be the source of evolution? So we don't actually discuss that point because we are concerned only with Patanjali's analysis of mind, buddhi, vritti, samskaras, etc. In all these matters, Patanjali's system is fully accepted. That's why you have to remember there is a technical problem in Patanjali's conclusion. Patanjali, the conclusions of Patanjali system. That's why when Swami Vivekananda interpreted Patanjali Yoga Sutras, he actually links Patanjali's system with Vedanta. So he uses the word Atman and so on. But actually, Patanjali doesn't speak about it the way Swamiji speaks. Because Swamiji knew the Patanjali system as such cannot be presented with a spiritual goal, with a spiritual goal in his system, because Patanjali doesn't talk about it, Atman, the realization, going beyond all this. He says, even Patanjali's system of Samadhi, the 8th Anga, Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhi. The Samadhi itself will make you fit for the highest Jnana Prapti realization. But it is not the realization itself. It makes you fit for it. It's called Chitta Shuddhi, mental purity. Anyway, that's a different subject. Okay.
So, Swamiji, one more question. Swamiji,
wait. No, it's not proper for us to discuss more than 2 questions. Now let us go to others, You will get chance in the coming sessions, okay? Yeah, thank you.
There is a question here, a request to summarize once again the meditation process.
Meditation, so as explained here, okay. Meditation here means as a way to objectify vrittis. Let us say when we focus on our own mind and think of what is going on within our own mind, then what happens is our emotions and feelings within our own mental system become the objects of meditation. Then what happens is those emotions, we get a handle on those emotions. When you meditate, you detach from it actually. See, when you don't meditate, you are so completely identified with our emotions. To give an example, I gave the example of either anger, likes or dislikes, whatever it is. Why should I be angry? I am getting angry. When a person feels I am getting angry, he gets the feeling because he is able to de-identify. He is able to detach himself from his anger. So his anger becomes the object of his thought, which means he has detached himself from his anger. Then he will be able to get control over his emotions. This is meditation that we discussed here. Meditation, when we discuss in the later sections of this book, as a part of Ashtanga Yoga, That is different. That meditation is the seventh anga, means yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi. That dhyana is different. That dhyana is focusing on a single ideal for a long time, just before samadhi experience. That is different. But dhyana, this vrittaya dhyana heya means these vrittis can be managed, can be eradicated through meditation. In that particular context, dhyana means focusing on the vrittis that are rising and falling in our own chittam. That's the idea. That's the meaning of meditation here. Meditation comes in different contexts with different implications. So we'll discuss according to the context. It doesn't mean the same in every context.
No more questions, Maharaj. We can probably take one more question if somebody has.
Yeah. So we can conclude now then.
Yes, Maharaj.
Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Pranamastu. Thank you all, especially thanks to those who ask questions, because your questions help me to explain certain things that I may have left behind during the main talk. Thank you. Thanks.
The recording has stopped.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you then.